Happening now. We'd like to welcome our guests from around North America, across North America, and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 365 for December the 29th, 2025, our final show of 2025. My name is Wes Fryer. I am a middle school media literacy teacher living in Charlotte, North Carolina, but currently in Manhattan, Kansas. And joining me as always from Big Sky Country, Jason Neiffer. It's been a few weeks, Dr. Neiffer. I'm sure nothing has happened at all in the AI and tech news in the last 3 weeks.
No, not that I've kept up with it at all. Like, I am still blown away about how much news you just miss by missing the headlines on any given day. But I am joining you tonight from my lovely hometown, my lovely current residence, which is Missoula, Montana. Good to see you in the holiday season, Dr. Fryer. Sorry I had to miss the last couple of weeks. I spent 10 days in Japan with
Yes,
a
that's
friend
right.
and that I work with, and then I've just been doing the holiday stuff the last week or so. And still trying to clear out email from when I was gone, but that is what kind of happens with that process.
AI has not solved all of your email needs.
No, no, and like, and to be clear, like, I mean, I've played with tools that will read and suggest answers to all your emails, and they work, and I think that they can even be tweaked to work better than they do out of the box. But I'm just not ready for that step yet, I think.
And how is Japan? How did this compare to your previous Japanese excursions and food experiences?
It was wonderful. I mean, it's such a fun place to travel, and it's a really easy place to travel. I was kind of expecting, because I had done some reading about like what Christmas time looks like in Japan, and I expected not a lot there, but Christmas stuff all over the place. In fact, we took the Shinkansen train, the bullet train in Japan, from Tokyo to Hiroshima. Where we kind of retraced the same steps that my wife and I took last summer. Great opportunity to see the Peace Park again, and they wished us Merry Christmas on the train announcements, and like interesting about how much kind of Christmas is seeped into the culture there. But really a wonderful trip again. And if you are looking for good places, if you either not traveled internationally or not traveled to Japan yet, I think Japan's a very easy place to travel in. There are some tips I would give, not the least of which is that Google Maps absolutely dominates Apple Maps in Japan. We'd heard that from some family friends that have been there a couple of times, and it's absolutely true. If you have Google Maps, it's really easy to navigate um, public transportation system there. So that's certainly a real boom when you can do that, because there's literally tons of lines and companies and subways and above ground trains and below ground trains and um, long distance bullet trains and regional trains in a pretty amazing way. But the phone gives you a pretty good way to navigate that.
I promise viewers we will not just talk about travel, but I want to ask one more related question. Did the availability of AI tools at all affect your planning and your trip in any way this time?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because it did. We created a notebook LM with a couple of PDF travel guides that we had, and then also just a bunch of YouTube videos that we found that kind of helped us plan. There are some things that, I mean, this is true of any country, but I think especially if you've never been to Asia before, I think Japan presents an interesting challenge because it is a very different culture than the United States. There's a kind of expected restraint that goes along there. And in fact, when we were taking the bullet train from Hiroshima back to Tokyo, there was a couple and some kids from Italy there that were not really following the kind of expectation of behavior for tourists and will really anyone in Japan. And it did lead to a little bit of strife with the train staff. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Um, the I there this happened last time too. When my wife and I were there, we had put in to ChatGPT. This would be a spring 2024, so that was about a year and a half into ChatGPT's wide release, and things like, we have an afternoon. Here's what I'm into. Here's what my wife's into. Give us some options that you think we both would like. And it did an extraordinary job at that. But we even did things like I had left a larger bag in the Tokyo Central train station when we went to Hiroshima, so that I could just do a 2-night bag, which actually would be very Japanese. They don't really travel with heavy bags. They if you have larger bags, the preference is actually that you ship them ahead. That's way more common with train and plane travel than it is to hike all your bags on a plane. So I just took my overnight bag with me, and so I put it into a locker in the central Tokyo train station, and then couldn't find the locker when we got back. So it ended up that I used ChatGPT. I put pictures of the signs that we were at, and it basically helped triangulate us. The only thing it couldn't help us figure out was we were on the wrong floor. So if we went down one floor, kept telling us don't go up, but didn't say going down is a possibility. We went down one floor, and actually it sent us to the exact right location. But and we asked someone finally. Heavens forbid we talk to humans instead of the machines. But it with the signage and helping with understanding some of the cultural stuff, and certainly with menus and that sort of thing, the AI was an incredible assistant. And I was probably 50-50 between Gemini and ChatGPT, and both were pretty extraordinary.
Well, fantastic. Well, we've had from up to 13 live viewers, and we're at 2, and we were at 5. So it's interesting. YouTube must be doing something different with this algorithm. So, for anybody who is with us live, you can check out the notes. I've just put a link into the chat, but you can also go to edtechsr.com/links. Dr. Neiffer, besides recapping your adventures in Japan tonight, what else are we going to do here for the next hour?
Well, mostly Dr. Fryer, and I collected a couple myself. Have collected some links that have interesting things to do with kind of the technological world. We're going to shoot them through the education prism. By the way, Dr. Fryer, I looked it up, and here's something interesting. We are 1 month away from the 10-year anniversary of EdTech.
No way! Oh my God! Wow.
January 27th, 2016. And so that happened fast. And
Whoa.
So, yeah, we have that.
Getting old around here. I don't know who it is.
Yeah. So, so that's something to look forward to is that process. But as Dr. Fryer mentioned, if you're interested in kind of following along with us or seeing the stuff that we don't get a chance to talk to tonight or talk about tonight, you can always go to our website, edtechsr.com/links. But we're going to take a look at certainly AI for sure tonight, but a couple other articles we've gathered include media literacy, a security story, and then our miscellaneous category, which always gets some interesting potpourri, if you will. Dr. Fryer, where would you like to start tonight?
Well, I think we better talk about Nana Banana Pro, because we've got our categorized links. We've got AI links, and underneath AI, we've got a subcategory for Nana Banana Pro with about 8 articles. We've got vibe coding, some other AI articles, the predictions about what's coming in AI. So let's talk Nano Banana. I'll go to this first article from PC Magazine. This is from yesterday on December 28th, and it's titled ChatGPT's latest AI image generator is its best yet, but Nano Banana Pro is better still. And this particular article is fantastic because it uses the image carousel feature of a web page, and you can take a look first at the new ChatGPT iteration. And so the first example there, they just asked, quote, generate me an image of a cozy suburban home with an open floor plan. I want to see a nice living space with dining room, kitchen, and living room, nothing too fancy. And so that, well, doggone it. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen here, because why not? I am not on. Oh, good grief. I'm using, by the way, the Vivaldi web browser. Oh, great. So looks like I've got to do some kind of authorization here. So here we go. All right, Vivaldi. But I'm on my own machine, Dr. Neiffer, so I can actually give myself permission. Okay, it says quit and open, but let's try this again. All right, we'll see if this works. So here we go, entire screen, and doggone it, wouldn't you know it? All right, whatever. Sorry. I'll have to switch over to the Chrome web browser. Second version is the ChatGPT's one's image slide, and it is just really, really plain. But the third one is the Nano Banana Pro version, which is extraordinarily more detailed and wonderful. So there's a whole lot of these in the article. And I know that based on your recommendation, I think going back to November, I have been using Gemini extensively, Nano Banana Pro extensively. And as I mentioned, I think in our last show, I actually did drop my monthly subscription to ChatGPT Plus, which I'd had for like 3 years. And I'm all in on Gemini. And it is extraordinary. So these articles with these comparisons provide some really good visual examples of that. I'm blown away. I mean, we've said it before, and this sounds old. This is the worst AI we're going to have. But it really is extraordinary. And this particular article actually inspires me to think about with my students this next semester as we are about to start our spring semester. I think I'm going to have our students use several different tools with that same prompt. So do a prompt comparison, and then I want you to show me that in Flint AI. I want you to show me that probably in Canva, and then our students do have access to Notebook LM, and I'm fairly sure they have access to Gemini directly. I don't know that they've got the features inside Google Slides. I did a presentation this last week, and I made all of my images right inside Google Slides. I did the prompt engineering in Gemini separately, but I did the actual slide creation with Nano Banana. So anyway, phenomenal, incredible, probably scary too. And this article talks about that too, right? Because and what I found it so good at doing that we couldn't do before is not only have all these words spelled right, but not just generate an entire new image, but say, okay, that's fine. Now I want you to tweak it and add this or change this. And so Google, the Gemini Nano Banana Pro team has done some different stuff that allows us to have considerable prompt control over iterations of images, which we just couldn't do before with any AI image generator I was using.
Yes, and it's absolutely stunning, and I'm really glad you wanted to talk about this week because I have some things to share in regards to that. One of the things that I mean, it's also true of the other image generators. It felt like that Ideogram was really at the lead of this, and then I'm not saying they've fallen behind, but the ability of Nano Banana to kind of pull in what feels like web searching, or at the very least, it's large gnarly cloud brain to be able to do something like create an infographic or something with relatively accurate information. It's pretty extraordinary. But I want to do a couple of quick demos here of things that I've discovered about Nano Banana in the last couple of weeks. The first one is that I do very much believe that you're really limited just by your prompting skills at this point. And so, Wes, why don't you go ahead and share my screen there? I'm also going to put this in the private chat, Wes, just so you have access to the prompt. In fact, it's not large enough, so I'll have to get that to you some other way. But I found this prompt, or a prompt like it, on Reddit, and basically it's going to create a calendar for me. But the key piece here isn't that the calendar is going to be probably pretty accurate, in part because I'm giving it a bunch of information so that it is an accurate calendar, but also I've asked it to pull in someone else's intellectual property here, which is, in this particular case, Looney Tunes. And so it's got a very specific thing that it's doing here, right? But there's a couple things. First, it's going to make this really fast. Like the part that I don't really understand, and really I think is part of the revelation about how much this technology has evolved, is that it's not just that it can create stunningly detailed images, but they are created very quickly. And in this particular case, this is an image of a commemorative style Looney Tune calendar. It didn't really follow my instructions because January has no calendar and the rest of the month seem to have double calendars on them. So I might actually have it redo that because that looks nothing like I wanted.
I think
It
you
looks
might
like
have
what I
used
wanted.
this a similar prompt, maybe not on our last show, but in the last few shows. Um, but that is much faster. Of course, it also wasn't necessarily completely accurate.
Yeah. And so from that standpoint, I mean, it's really quite an extraordinary model, and we have a couple other articles to talk about. That looks a little better, but still a little bit of weirdness. The word March, well, one of the
My wife has had weird experiences with Nano Banana too recently. I mean, she was creating custom thank you notes for
yeah.
students and parents, and it was just extraordinary. And then suddenly it just kind of stopped doing well and even following her directions, and she restarted it. So I don't know. There's some different things that have been going on
Yeah.
with it. It's a dynamic model. So like we're sharing this today on December 29th. But that's not to say you're going to have the exact same result when you try it or when
Yeah.
we do it tomorrow.
Well, and the calendar's all funkified here, and I love the third month on here, Daffrary, which seems like some kind of Daffy Duck related model. So, um, but the other thing I want to point out is that Nano Banana Pro is now the default model in Notebook LM, and I think we talked about this last time too, that that um, they are allowing you to create slides now um, in Notebook LM, not only an infographic but also a full slide deck if you want. And one of the things that I have figured out is that again, no acknowledgement of intellectual property at all. And so, like, kind of give you like a road to follow down here. This is a set of slides I created on one of my libraries. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but Gemini now allows you to add a Notebook LM as a source. In Gemini. So if you keep your libraries relatively clean, and
You can
also
just add the whole library within your Gemini prompt.
within your Gemini prompt now. Yeah.
Wow,
And
that's wild.
so, and it gives you much better results because Gemini itself has a much larger context window than the prompting window in Notebook LM. But this
Yes.
particular case, this is a library I have about writing student-facing text, and I asked to give this in the style of a Japanese subway map, in part because I did do a lot of reading on Japanese graphic design while I was in Japan, because that's the kind of nerdy stuff that I'm kind of into. And one of the things I pointed out was that a lot of Japanese design is around clarity, because you'll notice that signage there, for example, when you have a complicated train system, that you absolutely want to make sure that everything is super duper clear. And so one of the things that I've been studying over the last couple of years is semiotics, which is the study of symbols and making meaning from design and text. So it's kind of related to that, but it does a pretty good job of creating, a subway system like graphic design, which very impressed with. I think that's great. So then I tried something that's a little less sense meaning and a little more what I would call a kind of design sense. This is around the so-called Bauhaus design precept, which was a popular European style that's still very, very popular, sometimes called Swiss International style. In fact, it's one of my favorite graphic design styles. It's Ethan Mollick said a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn that one of the things that tools like Nano Banana has done for him is that it's given him an excuse to learn more about graphic design. And my own study in graphic design, which is purely kind of a joyous thing for me. I love graphic design. I'm not a very good graphic designer, but I love studying graphic design. I like appreciating good graphic design. But this one's about a group of resources I have around strategy, and it does a really great job of kind of that Bauhaus look. But none of those two concepts are intellectual property based, right? Like subway maps all kind of look the same around the world. That's kind of a universally accepted design precept. Bauhaus is something that's been around for a century. It has no particular intellectual property, especially for the most generic of pieces. But as it turns out, you don't have to be stuck on those pieces. You can do all sorts of things that really do violate someone's intellectual property. So in this particular case, I don't remember which library this was, but I had to do something in the style of Seinfeld, and it just pulled. And you could tell these are generated images in part because not all of these images are. I mean, they're obviously not the original images for sure, right? But these are all, strong references to Seinfeld characters, and it's kind of Seinfeldian, even though I just asked for the graphic design to be part of this process. And I thought it was kind of funny that they pulled some prominent lines from the series. They yada yada the most important part. I then tried more ridiculous, and it created one based off of the movie Airplane. In my opinion, one of the greatest comedy movies ever created. Again, full of intellectual property that not acknowledged at all. What's interesting about this is that you can tell that it's not the original images, because some of these are clearly generated. Like that's not a captain from the movie. That's not the kid from the movie. It kind of looks like them, but these are all very clearly generated. I also know that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was did a cameo in the movie, he was actually sitting in the left pilot's, not the right pilot seat. And so, that sort of thing. But then I started going down the kind of cartoon intellectual property, and it very easily made for me. In this case, it was South Park. And it did kind of give me kind of South Parkian design, not just of the images, but also the approach to the slides. Which I thought was pretty interesting, and again, beautiful slides, right? But I don't have the right to use this stuff. This is Beavis
And again,
Butthead.
these are slides created with Notebook LM.
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
Wow.
And so these are all Beavis and Butthead slides. And then probably the most extraordinary ones was these are Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle style slides. It picked up the kind of cartoony comic book styling here, and did a really extraordinary job of processing these sources, which in this case I believe were about problem solving, and really quite an extraordinary situation. But part of what I think is a real challenge here is, and this is a challenge in the classroom anyways, but it is an extremely powerful tool set for creating images. And there doesn't seem to be nearly as many protections built into the Google models as there is in a ChatGPT or ideograms image generation models, or some of the open source models that are prominent. The Black Forest models, the ones I keep thinking about, that one's called Flux, which is an open source model. The implementation of those models has a lot of protections built into it for things by intellectual property. Nothing here, right? And I'd also note too that while I do think that we have to keep student access to AI in at least the medium term, if not a nearer term concept, that if you're not thinking about what students are going to do with access to these extraordinary models, then you need to teach yourself a little bit about this. And I will tell you, not going to share the specifics here, but I was able to get it to make some very off-color slides for sure, things that would not pass the sniff test to even the most open of parents, and it was able to do that for me with zero pushback. And there's strategies here, right? It's very easy actually to talk any of these AI models out of their rules. You just need to push it from a different perspective, or ask it to emulate something and put a couple steps away from the action, and it will generally do what you want it to do. But I think this is something we need to be thinking about, and also, this certainly lends credence to a common creative argument about the theft of intellectual property, but this puts it, front and center, right? Like, even if you're inspired by the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, if you're making art yourself, you can't just turn around and make Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff and use it in any way commercially. And so, something to think about.
Absolutely. Well, I want to go to our second article there about the licensing from Disney. But if you wouldn't mind, since your screen sharing is working, just go to your private chat again and StreamYard, and then if you'll click that link. So I had a chance. This is my geek of the week, but I'll talk more about it. But I did a slideshow for this presentation called "Stories About AI," and I don't know why, but I decided to go with like a Scooby-Doo theme. And so initially, when I created when I used Nano Banana 3 to create an advertisement image sort of for it, I mean, it's Scooby-Doo. I mean, it's Shaggy and it's Scooby, and it looks just like him. What I ended up doing was changing it and putting myself in there and one of a golden retriever. But then I had this theme where I wanted mean AI and nice AI. And I asked it with every image that it created, and you can go through just some of the images. These two characters are there, and the same kind of vibe of being sort of in a data center, futuristic. It's all there. And so while this isn't like Bauhaus or some other like referenced design, I'm going to write a blog post about this, but I created the prompts for each one of these images inside Gemini, but then use the create image inside Google Slides to make the image. That's one that didn't really have the two robots, but I mean, it was cool, and I my gosh, the possibilities here creatively. Because it's sort of like a story. I'm sort of channeling your AI centrist, Jason. Going to talk about the good and the bad, because I felt an obligation in this presentation. I think it's the third time I've had a chance to share about AI here at my dad's retirement community. Not to just be, talking about how wonderful it all is and everything's great. Like this is the Nano Banana example. We took that picture that was actually at my mother's memorial service there in the upper left corner, generated a Christmas card where we're all like Santa and elves and stuff. And then if you go to the next one, this is an example of the iteration. Because I had wanted some changes. So I said, hey, put a banner and, move some things around. And then if you go to the next one, that's the final Christmas card. And it's not recreated. And if you've used these tools, you can have the exact same prompt and you put it into the same model, and it in the past has generated a completely different image. So these were a few slides where I didn't have the good robot, the bad robot, but there is this beautify option. You can see now they start paying. I mean, this was cool, like to tell a story and to have a design and a theme. I've never done this before in a presentation quite like it, because I mean, I don't have the time to do it, and and I'm not going to hire somebody to go and do this. But it was rather jarring to me to see how this could absolutely be Scooby-Doo, Scrappy-Doo. And so I decided, well, I'm not going to exactly go with that. But then I ended up going with the theme that still, it was cool. I mean, this was playing with me as well. But as we've said over and over again, these tools it's important to use these tools, to play with these tools. I don't think we can get our heads around their capabilities, their implications adequately if we're not, sort of like if we're not cooking in the kitchen, so to speak. With these tools. And that's not to say that there aren't issues, and there's all kinds of things. I did, Jason, finish Empire of AI by Karen Howe.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what a phenomenal book that is. And it just really, I'm still processing the review that I'm going to share about that. But like the extractive economy and sort of the neocolonialism that's taking place with data today
Yeah.
is really a troubling and problematic thing. And Karen highlights so many different issues and certainly, peels away, let's just say, some of the veneer and the sparkle of OpenAI that many of us might have felt was there with respect to Sam Altman and the whole incident where he was fired abruptly by the board and then restored. Anyway, there's so many different sides of this. So anyway, back to Nano Banana. It was so cool to get to create that and to, again, address a misconception some people have. Like, I didn't just give it a prompt and say, I had my outline that I made in my presentation. I didn't just give it my outline and say, here, go. I mean, I spent several hours doing this, and I created each prompt individually, and in many cases iterated on that image. So it is a for me, in this case, it was a co-creation process. And I've said this before multiple times. It is mind-blowing to be able to take the creativity in our minds and express that verbally through text, and we can do speech to text or whatever, but to take a text prompt and not only be able to work with the computer system and algorithm to create something, but then to iterate on it and improve it and hone it. It is incredible, absolutely incredible. And I'm hopeful. I'd really like to help host a playing with AI, a play date and ed camp sometime in the next, even this next spring semester. We're talking about some possibilities of a media literacy day-long event or something like that coming up maybe in the spring or in the summer. But it's just so powerful to play with these tools. And I know that, you showing me things and demonstrating things in our calls has really been impactful as well. And I appreciate that, because serving as filters for each other in this, world of crazy information by itself, but then with AI tools specifically, that's like, people were asking me, how do you know so much about this? I was like, well, I hang around with this guy named Jason, and I just do the stuff he tells me to do, and it's working for me. So
well, and I'm working on some stuff for January for our Frontier Learning Lab. One of the things we may do, depending on what direction we go into, is kind of a little series called 5 Quick Wins for Administrators with AI, like ways that you can integrate it into your day-to-day work in a way that helps you kind of learn more about the process. And one of the things that I have thought was really interesting is something we just kind of ran into a couple months ago, which is the process is, how do you take your school mascot logo or your school logo and turn it into other stuff? And so the process we have is called extracting the design DNA from it. It's 4 or 5 prompts. It works with Nano Banana. It works with ChatGPT. It works with Claude, but you'd have to use another source to actually create the image. But if you've got a logo for your high school mascot, you want to make a wrestling poster out of it, you can do one that almost completely matches what your logo does, and it takes about 6 minutes when it's all said and done. And I did make a joke a couple of years ago that AI will do something pretty magical for the sports posters that parents put up before games and stuff. Big deal in every high school I've ever taught in. And in fact, I created a bunch of images for the high school I went to. I was talking to the faculty there last year and showed them dominating their crosstown rivals in every activity possible. And that was, a very poor model compared to what's available through Nano Banana today. So,
and I think this is really important, because here we are in the middle of the school year. There's so many things that we can do with these tools, and there's exciting and good stuff, but there's also a lot of bad stuff.
Yep.
And the fact that we can take any photograph that we want, and that was a demonstration of it with that Christmas card of our family, and say, hey, I want you to use this face. I want you to put this on this. And then the red teaming and there's guardrails that are on these things. All right, I think we're setting a record, Jason. We have talked for 34 minutes and 10 seconds about one article. That does show how Nano Banana is pretty pretty potent topic. I want to share this article. This is the second one on the AI category, and it's titled. This is from the OpenAI blog. The Walt Disney Company and OpenAI reached landmark agreement to bring beloved characters from across Disney's brands to Sora. And as many of us may know, Sora is the video AI platform of OpenAI. And what I understand from this is there's more than 200 Disney, Marvel or Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars characters. And now this agreement is going to allow users of ChatGPT to build videos with these characters legally. There's other aspects to this. Disney's making a $1 billion equity investment in OpenAI. But the streaming library of these is going to be curated. My very much armchair analysis of this at this point, is that Disney is wanting to get ahead of this, recognizing that people are going to do this at some point. I don't know if this was OpenAI first. I think it probably was OpenAI first. Somebody decided to open the floodgates of copyrighted materials, because it was not very long ago where you could not take copyrighted materials with ChatGPT or Gemini or these other, large main models and create with them, because the guardrails just wouldn't let you do it. And now it does. So this Sora license feels to me like Disney wanting to get ahead of this, but they're also curating this. But I mean, I sort of hesitate to say this, but I mean, I feel like the floodgates are absolutely wide open right now as we start 2026. And back to like schools and school impact, if you're an administrator, you're a teacher, parent, whatever your role is, like students are already and will be using these tools to do all kinds of things, some of which are undoubtedly going to be devious and maybe even malicious with images. And it's going to be a dumpster fire. I'm sorry, but that's sorry to bring the bad news to you, but I really think that the fact that there are so few guardrails and it's so incredibly good, it's incredibly exciting that I can make that kind of Christmas card with my family's picture. But what else can I do? And that's where the dumpster fire comes in.
Well, and there's an article related to that I also shared in that same group. It's from a lecturer. I think she's in the UK. Her name is Genevieve Smith Nunez. And it's a really great article that kind of walks through, and it's a couple months old, but the kind of ethical questions behind images and why images are complicated. But the ethical landscape goes everywhere from consent, agency, psychological impact of images, creative rights, bias and representation. Those are all pieces of this, even though it does acknowledge that there are some really extraordinary use cases for it, particularly in education. We've talked a lot, particularly about the third point she makes about the positive elements about what AI can do for accessibility, particularly web accessibility. It's going to be a real game changer. But make no doubt about it that AI brings a bunch of pieces of complexity to the process, and that's why I do think that if you're going to roll out an AI tool to students, that you have a mechanism to at least highlight problematic usage, so that you can head things off the pass, right? And also that you can't expect students to pick up the ethics on their own, right? And so talking about this, whether you're inviting these tools in your classroom or not, and in an even-handed way too, right? And Wes, have you had a chance to look at the Sora network since they became a social network?
No, I need to do that. I only created with Sora initially after it launched, and I've been spending most of my time with the image side. I'm
Yeah.
aware of that, but no, it's you've talked a little bit about. I mean, this is the
Yeah.
world of AI slop. We've talked about AI slop.
Yeah, well, and it's all AI slop, right?
Yeah,
Like it's a social
right.
network based entirely off of AI slop. And what's interesting about that is that there is some, I'm not sure if comfort is the right word, but when you know it's all AI slop, right? I think it's easier to at least think about like you're not expecting anything to be real there, right? You know it's all completely generated,
Yes,
and there's
right.
something to that, right?
Oh,
But
absolutely.
it is completely ridiculous. For every video that seems to purport something real, it recreates the puking scene from Stand by Me, but with much grosser outcomes, right? And remember, we have this phenomenon in culture called the middle school boy, that's going to gross out stuff, right? Like that's age appropriate behavior, as it turns out. And if you have something that will create any ridiculous idea you have in your mind, that seems highly problematic to me, right? And that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of happy that it seems like for sure Gen Zers and Gen Alphas seem to be cynical about these technologies, right? It's not universal for sure, but there's some cynicism there. Good, right? Like we need you to be cynical about this. And in fact, if we'd been more cynical about social media 15 years ago, we might be in better shape today, as it turns out. But a lot of interesting things going on there.
So many thoughts. Number one, back to the classroom. This is one of the things. One of the things I'm going to be doing with my students next week is I'm going to be talking about full attribution of everything that they're doing with AI for any kind of assignment, for any kind of schoolwork. I've been reading different articles about, so many different approaches that university professors and K-12 teachers have been taking. And I really think it's important to be engaged in dialogue with students and to not just be in a strict, cat and mouse. I'm trying to catch you. You're trying to get around my guardrails, and all we're trying to do is gamify this thing so that we don't like do the assignment or think about it. So I think attribution, but then also like the goals, using these tools for good, not using these tools to harm others or to do harm. That was again something that Karen Howe brought out in Empire of AI, and I talked about in my presentation this last week. Was the goals? What are the goals that we're trying to advance? And yes, I will attest that in the middle school environment, it can be very, very challenging. The other thing I was going to say about that was I forgot. Did you want to share something? I see you're clicking on. You want me to share your screen again?
No, actually.
All right.
I
I want to tell a story, which is about the misinformation, disinformation side of this, and I'll use a couple quick links. So I put these under media literacy. Clearly, Jason, we need to get together, more than once every 3 weeks. There was a article from the actual Medium of Avi Loeb, who is, if you didn't know, a physicist and astrophysicist at Harvard, and he has really been doing some great reporting and tracking of this extrasolar, what do they call it? It's an interstellar object, 3I Atlas, which is like the third interstellar object. It's not NASA says it's a comet. It's only the third thing that we've ever tracked that is originating outside of our solar system. So it's not in orbit around our sun. And this was his post from a day ago. And there's some real interesting things that seem to suggest that this object, may be technological. It may not just be a natural comet. Well, my connection to this is I got absolutely taken in by a video. And so back on December 8th, I wrote a blog post about this. And this is a deep fake video. And as I did check it out before I shared it, and I was glad I did, because the clock behind him is frozen. And during this video that I was watching, there was a weird thing that happened with his voice that actually triggered me. Oh, is this real? But it was so realistic, and the science of what he was saying, it all sounded very believable and technological. And just like we've talked about with other kinds of bad actor hacks, like, any of us can be tricked. It is possible to be tricked. And I felt silly and stupid that I had been taken in by this, because I was this close to sending this video to my son, who works as a contractor for NASA, to our daughter, who's studying to be in the Space Force. And anyway, it I don't having a personal experience like this, and thankfully this wasn't like in front of people, like I'm at a conference sharing something. Someone's like, "That's not real. You're showing something fake." Man, it's just this. We are not glimpsing the future. We are glimpsing the present today of what's happening with video. And to your point, Jason, about the Sora social, at least knowing it's all slop, it's all AI. I mean, I want that. I mean, my wife is really enjoying looking at cabins that she knows are not real, but they've been AI generated, and they're beautiful, and they're walkthroughs, and there's stuff on golden retrievers and different things that she's seeing. I mean, I want all of that stuff to not only be labeled in my social network, whether it's Facebook or something else. I want to be able to click a slider that says no AI generated content. And I don't think Facebook's going to give that to us. And
Yeah.
I don't think social networks, we're trying to have some very, very limited, like even now today, I created an image with Nano Banana 3. And when I posted it to Threads, which is Meta's microblogging platform like Twitter, Mastodon, or Blue Sky, it automatically detected the little watermark in the bottom right corner, and it automatically labeled it as AI generated, which is good. I'm usually checking that box myself when I'm posting something that I've made with AI. But oh my gosh, using these tools and seeing what's being done, and then having experiences like the one I'm telling you about, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I thought that was real. It's a jarring thing to truly believe something is real that's fairly extraordinary, and then you realize it's not. It's completely fabricated. Like,
Yep.
I don't know what the word for that experience is. There's some cognitive dissonance there. That's a powerful experience. And I really think this is so important for us all to recognize that, like, Photoshop is nothing compared to what Nano Banana 3 allows people to do. I mean, at least with Photoshop, you had to have the software, and then you had to have some skills. You don't have to have any skills right now to do, extremely powerful, but also potentially misleading things.
Yeah, totally. And I'd also say too that it's funny. I think my mom is the probably the hippest 70 something to AI in the city of Great Falls, in part because her kid has been super into it. But she notices now that on her Facebook feed, 50% of it now is really cute, like baby and animal videos that are clearly AI generated.
Yes, yes.
And my mom said that, she went kind of down one of those rabbit holes one day where she's like, where did this come from? That seems weird. And then she ended up on a page that was clearly all AI generated stuff. And she said people are responding to them like they're real,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And even I've noticed this. I can no longer keep TikTok on my phone because it's just too easy to lose a half an hour in 30 seconds. But I was noticing the University of Montana was in the FCS football semifinal last weekend against Montana State. Actually, first time that the two in-state teams met in a playoff game ever, which is kind of surprising. But there's a couple of fake, or I should say, AI generated accounts that purport to be news accounts. And they're clearly animated, so a careful eye wouldn't think that that's AI anyways. But on a lot of TikTok content, people will push back against slop, but they're not doing it here. I noticed, and it is really interesting, and there's no line yet for this. I mean, I have some lines, right? Like as an example of this, I have a couple of vendors that do AI generated educational content that have tried to stay on my radar, but I would never recreate media around the lives of humans for a history or geography course, because that feels very dystopian to me, especially if it's not the culture if it's another culture of which you're kind of relying on the biases that AI might bring to that party, right? But it's a real issue, right? And that's part of the reason why I think it's so important for teachers at least to experiment with these tools, because they need to understand how easy it is to generate the slop, right?
Yeah.
Now, that said, it's also really easy to generate stuff that doesn't look like slop, or at least I think it's really easy to do that,
Oh,
right? In
oh
the
my
same
God.
way that I feel like it's not that hard to create text that seems like it's not written by AI, but it's really an extraordinary time.
So I'm going to say this. I predict. Sometimes we do this for our like the end of year, whatever. And I want to get to that predictions post, by the way, that you put
Yeah,
into the show notes. I predict it is going to become so important in upcoming elections here in the United States and other places to verify if the candidate themselves said it or not.
yeah,
Because some of what I'm seeing now, like I said, is like cabin walkthrough videos and golden retrievers. I saw a German Shepherd, supposedly jump off a roof yesterday into a swimming pool. And it's just silly stuff that's AI generated, and it's not that big of a deal. But it is going to be a really big deal when people are being paid big money to create disinformation against other candidates. And it's just, I'm not going to use profanity. I'm going to use the word dumpster fire, but it is just, it's that, man. It's that.
yep,
We're in for a show of refuse and just bad stuff. And, you know, I wonder how we can create channels. Oh, I know what I was going to say a minute ago. I wonder how we can create channels of content that's more vetted, right? Vetted content that you can trust, unlike what it is now, on social media. Um, this is interesting, right? I don't know if we'll talk about it much this time, but last show we mentioned Australia because they began implementing their new law that prohibits access of social media platforms, not including Roblox, but including most social media platforms by young people that are under 16. And there's massive multi-thousands of dollar fines that the companies will face if they don't take substantial effort to try and keep kids under 16. I think a good case can be made that kids are not ready for this. I mean, these things are not ready for adults. Ready. What does ready mean? And it is such a wild west. I wonder if we'll have schools doing that because I'm approaching my middle school media literacy from the standpoint of, and we kind of have to do this, like the kids are using these tools, right? They have access. Many of them have phones. They got computers at home. They're using these tools. And so I think it's important that we have some education about the uses of these tools. And I think these tools are going to be persistent. Like, I don't think AI is going away. I think it's going to continue to become more powerful. But that being said, how much time at school do we need to spend/waste in this complete Wild West dumpster fire? And then how much do we need to try to build critical thinking skills that are going to serve students well, irrespective of whatever kind of challenge they face? I think that's a pretty important question. And I think the parallel there is, are kids going to be hopelessly wounded by not being on social media platforms until they're 16? I don't think so. And I
no,
think there's a lot of agreement that
yeah,
the unintended consequences and the negative impacts of those platforms, it's going to be beneficial for them to not be on those platforms. I wonder if we might see the same thing, especially as this AI world just continues to kind of spiral out of control because no one is in control of this. We have very limited regulations that organizations and governments have attempted at this point. And because of the ways in which this is pitched as this existential threat with China, and we've got to win the race, and let's just you go, pedal to the metal. Let's let the data centers get built as fast as they can, because we just gotta beat China. Oh my gosh, it is very, very challenging. And I do know that some schools are taking that approach of sort of like, well, it's all handwriting and cursive, guys. And I don't know. We're going to have to think real carefully about
Right.
it's.
Well, and that's the way I've described that is that it's a clever hack to deal with the right now moment, right? There's a long-term strategy that I'm not sure if I really know what it's going to look like yet. And in fact, and I think the thing that's important to also note is that, Wes and I are generally a fan of getting technology into classrooms, right? That we want to empower students with that tech and help them understand it in a meaningful and profound way. But like I mentioned, a couple of times before, I've talked to a couple of vendors now that will front load their conversation with AI wasn't made for kids, and it's not. It's barely made for adults, right? And I also think the fact that it can be so easily talked out of its rules, right? And that's part of the reason why. And I won't mention any particular products here because I don't think that's a fair thing. I think all products struggle from this, but some of the AI tutoring platforms that claim that they're programmed to be 100% secure. I mean, I get that, but I think it's really easy to red team them in a way that allows you to not follow the rules anymore. And I am actually very much a trickster with these, right? Like I've developed some strategies where I can easily get it to ignore its own rules. Let's go ahead and do the predictions video, Wes, before it's kind of our last thing tonight.
Absolutely.
I've not heard the creator here. Her name is Sinead Novell. She's got a YouTube channel and a Substack post. She's Canadian, and I was really impressed with this video. I thought it was pretty interesting, pretty profound. So she certainly gained a Substack reader. But she makes 8 predictions about what's coming in 2026, and a couple. And what's interesting about this is they seem like they come off as either critical or perhaps a touch sycophantic to the AI, but they're not. They're really pretty well done in kind of the middle ground piece. But the first thing she talks about is an offline renaissance that. People seem to be pushing against social media and against online various ways to connect online. I agree completely with that. I wonder if it's going to impact schools or not beyond just the again the clever hack of moving to handwriting inside a class. But a couple other that I think are interesting that I'd love to look at in a year from now. Voice first was another prediction she made, which is that we would quickly continue to move away from typing on our mobile devices and towards voice. I would have said that's ridiculous a year ago or 2 years ago, but AI models have made such advances in picking up both the translation but also the intent of phrases that seems like it's very possible. Siri continues to be a terrible voice assistant and somehow worse than it was a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't really get that, but it's something I think that we should keep an eye on. I will also tell you that I've played with Gemini on an Android phone and it's better. It's not quite ready to say it's the best ever, but it's also pretty good. And I heard the other day was that phone-based models, in other words, AI that run on even a modest phone, are as good as ChatGPT 4 was, which was released 2.5 years ago.
Yes.
That blew away the world, right, with its functionality. So if we can now fit that onto a phone and process that on a phone processor, that tells you where we're at. The year of AI glasses is coming. That we'll see. Meta's had a lot of good success there, but there's ethical issues. for sure with that. And also, the thing I keep thinking about is who's the market for that, like who's going to use these glasses, especially since that, we had interesting smart glasses, 10, 12 years ago in the form of Google Glass. That didn't stick at all. AI backlash, which is not real shocking. I'm saving one of these to the end. AI goes mainstream in politics. Not only will it have a big impact on elections, more than it did in 2024, but 2026 should be a big year for that. But not just that it impacts the electoral process, but also we're going to start expecting more specific information out of politicians about AI, right? It's not good enough to say pro AI or anti AI. Like, you're going to have to start backing it up with actual proposals. Cultural moment and entertainment, mostly related to AI, and then medical breakthroughs, big medical breakthroughs backed by AI. But the thing that I want to focus on here for just a moment is that she prognosticates that LLMs, large language models, so the primary generative AI technology that exists right now, may come to its functional limit in 2026. And I've heard this a lot across different podcasts, that the idea of constantly putting more money and larger models into AI is no longer getting the results that it was, say, 6 months or a year ago, and that either the technology stalls out at some point, or at the very least, it gets diminishing returns based on the investment. But she also talks about that the rise of world models is likely to make a larger impact in 2026. I'd heard of world models. I ended up looking it up to get a little more information on them. I still can't really say that I can explain it in a simple way, other than to say that AI world models work by spinning up a virtual world to answer your query in. I can't tell you how that works, or I mean, I can barely talk about how an LLM works, but it may be the technology that ends up replacing LLMs, the all new hotness in 2026. So I think this video is very much worth your time. If you are especially are kind of keeping an eye on where things might go. But I would also, as I yawn near my bedtime at 8 p.m. Mountain Time, something Ethan Mollick has said actually for 3 years now, is that even if the technological advancements of AI stop right now, right? Like if LLMs stall out, there is years, if not decades, of impacts that these technologies will have on our society. So, I would argue Nano Banana is a great example of that. We have extraordinary image generation technology available to us now, whether LLMs, advance more or not. So, just something interesting to keep an eye on for 2026.
I've said this before. I really feel like Google just put their foot on the accelerator. They had their foot on the brake, and I think now they've just decided to just let it go, let it rip, and it's a wild ride, and we're in the middle of it. All right, let's do some geeks of the week, and then we gotta get out of here. Mine is a video that I posted to Substack. I've got a media literacy Substack that I have posted to intermittently, and this is called Stories About AI, December 2025. So I meant to record my session I did on December 26th, and I forgot. So I just recorded a session afterwards. And it's just a lot of my thoughts as far as, 4 different stories about AI, but then also just kind of some big picture things to keep in mind. And a lot of it's stuff, Jason, that we've talked about and that's come out of our conversation. So it's sort of a synthesis of that for the end of the year. How about you?
I would like to share an app that is very timely with the rise of Gemini. It's called Gemini Desk. It's an open source app that you can download to a Windows, Mac, or Linux PC, and it's basically a desktop interface for Gemini. And one of the I don't know if it's really a criticism, but one of the things you'll hear occasionally is that ChatGPT and Claude, because they have a desktop app that integrates pretty decently into the operating system, that's a huge advantage that they have, and I would tend to agree with that. But Gemini gives you that same thing for Gemini, and at they're working on, and again, it's open source software, so you can download it at no cost. They're working on putting some tentacles into the operating system that Gemini can then access, including things like MCP servers. So very interesting app, and does require a little bit of setup because it takes over a few too many keystroke commands, including things like what you would use to open up a new tab in a web browser. So that's not all that great, but you can control that finitely in the settings of the app. So if you are a Gemini user and you kind of miss that desktop app experience, Gemini Desk will recreate that for you.
Wow, fantastic. Well, Jason, when you're not here enlightening us about Nano Banana Pro, where else can folks find you?
Best place to find me, aicentrist.com and LinkedIn.
Awesome. And you can find me at wesfryer.com. This has been our usually once a week, several times a month, opportunity to discuss tech news. And you can find links to our show at edtechsr.com. Hopefully you'll be able to find us anywhere your podcasts are curated. We have migrated our podcast to Substack, and so you can subscribe to us on Substack. But if you want to see the show right away, we stream live to YouTube, and that is immediately archived and available. We have 60 followers on Facebook, and so if you do like the show, we'd encourage, and you're on Facebook, we'd encourage you to like our page, because after we hit 100 users, we'll be able to again stream directly live to Facebook. But until next time, we encourage you to stay savvy, stay safe, have a happy new year, and we look forward to continuing to ride this roller coaster of AI news and educational technology developments and everything else that is happening in our society with respect to technology together on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night, everybody.